keep this going, I'm going to pass it on over to Diana Paulson, Senior Policy Analyst, who's going to talk to us about some other issues, cannabis legalization. Diana Paulson.
All right, thanks, Kadita. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. So if you guys know us at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, you know that one thing we're continually concerned with is our ability to raise revenue in the state. So that and our concerns around criminal justice and racial justice issues led us to look into adult use cannabis legalization. So we wrote a brief last fall exploring the potential benefits of legalizing marijuana in the state, and so we just kind of took a cursory look, but I'll walk you through some of the things that we found, and I'm also happy to share the link with you guys as well. So Pennsylvania is one of 33 states that has legalized medical marijuana, and medical marijuana became available in February 2018. And 11 states plus the District of Columbia have legalized adult use. And Colorado and Washington State were two of the states that passed it early on. It was enacted in 2012 in both of those states. And their experience gives us some information about the impact of legalization and lessons that they've learned that we looked at. One thing to know is that, public support is growing for legalization of adult use, and this support has grown quickly over time. In 2015, support was about 40% in Pennsylvania, and a more recent poll found that now 59% of Pennsylvanians support legalizing adult use. Attorney General Josh Shapiro and Auditor General DePasquale support this, and as you guys have probably heard, last year Lieutenant Governor Fetterman conducted a listening tour across Pennsylvania, and he found support for the idea as well. And since he came out with his findings after the listening tour, the governor has since expressed support as well. So there's growing support by public officials. Moving on to the next slide. So in our brief, we began to document some of the economic and social benefits of legalization. And the first benefit is that legalizing adult use will create jobs. Colorado 18,000 full-time equivalent jobs in the state. About 70% of those jobs were in stores and dispensaries, in cultivation and growing, or in product manufacturing operations. And the other 30% was created as a result of the purchases made by the marijuana industry for goods and services, things like security guards, jobs in construction, and real estate, that kind of thing. Moving on, there's another benefit, which is something that we think is really important. Legalizing adult use would reduce the number of individuals, disproportionately African American, who are arrested for marijuana offenses. So we know that usage rates of marijuana is very similar among blacks and whites, yet black people in Pennsylvania are 3.6% more likely to be arrested, or 3.6 times more likely to be arrested than whites for marijuana possession. Several cities in our state have decriminalized marijuana, but it's not enough. Philadelphia has a civil fine, and Pittsburgh, York, Harrisburg, State College, and Erie have downgraded to a summary offense, but it still identifies possession as a crime. And evidence shows from Baltimore and Philadelphia that decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana does not address racial disparities in the justice system, and those arrested still remain disproportionately black. So full legalization may also not fully reduce racial disparities, but it would significantly reduce the number of people arrested. But it's our belief that legalization must be accompanied by police reform in order to address racial disparities. What legalizing cannabis would do in Pennsylvania is keep tens of thousands of individuals out of the criminal justice system, many of whom are young people of color who are just getting their lives started. And we believe strongly that legalization should be accompanying with righting the wrongs of the past, giving driver's license back, and expunging records. So if you move on to the next slide, another thing that legalizing adult use would do is save on criminal justice costs. While marijuana charges account for only a small fraction of the total Pennsylvania criminal justice costs, it would result in annual savings of about $20 million. And moving on, legalizing adult use would generate revenue at a time when our state faces an ongoing public investment deficit that Mark talked about. So Auditor General DePasquale's office released a report on the potential revenue and financial benefits of legalizing recreational marijuana in July 2018. And the report estimates that legalizing marijuana would create a roughly $1.66 billion industry in the state. And given this, Pennsylvania could raise approximately $581 million a year. And that would be by imposing a 35% tax rate on the industry. This would be through a 10% grower producer excise tax, a 19% retail sales excise tax, and a 6% local sales tax. And Philadelphia and Allegheny counties could also be given the ability to impose local taxes, which could bring in significant resources as well. So this additional revenue could be used for good in Pennsylvania. The states that have legalized adult use have used their revenue for a variety of things like early literacy programs, school construction, basic health plans. And one model that we like in particular is, in Massachusetts and California, they're planning to invest funds into low-income communities and mostly communities of color that have been harmed by unequal drug enforcement. So another benefit is, tourism. Colorado made $1.2 billion in tax revenue from tourism, and one survey found that legalization influenced 49% of visitors' decisions to visit the state. So as more states legalize, obviously the benefit from marijuana tourism won't be as great, but that's another reason to potentially pass legalization sooner rather than later. Moving on, there are, when people talk about legalizing adult use, there's a lot of concerns that come up pretty regularly. And we looked briefly at that in our paper. One is that, do youth use marijuana at higher rates once it's legalized? And studies have shown that legalization has not resulted in increased usage by youth. Another concern often raised is, are roads less safe? And here the data is not as clear, and this is partially because of the challenge of measuring THC in drivers. It's not the same as alcohol, and it's hard to tell if a driver is impaired. So some states test THC with a blood test, and other states rely on trained observers. But arrests for DUIs have decreased since legalization in both Washington State and Colorado, and that's DUIs of alcohol and drugs. And in terms of crash rates, there's no clear correlation between crash rates and marijuana legalization. In some places, you've seen, the data has shown slight upticks in fatal crash rates for those testing positive, but that also might be due to changed screening and data reporting requirements. And finally, some people say that marijuana is a great gateway drug. But evidence shows it's not a gateway drug and, in fact, can be used as an exit drug. So new evidence shows marijuana can actually be used effectively as an exit drug from a number of things: alcohol, nicotine, even antidepressant medications. And some patients are turning to marijuana for pain relief instead of opioids. In fact, recently a study came out connecting the legalization of adult use and a decrease in opioid deaths. In Colorado, the legalization of adult use led to a drop in opioid-related deaths by more than 6.5% 2 years after legalization. So considering Pennsylvania's problem with opioid use and overdoses, legalization could potentially help to curb this problem. So we made some recommendations on things to think about in terms of structuring the legalization of adult use. One of the things we recommend is using the existing wine and spirit stores for distribution. There are several reasons for that. One is, the wine and spirit stores have well-trained staff who have experience selling controlled substances. And there's already a system in place to do public education. The PA Liquor Control Board regulates the alcohol industry in the state and, promotes responsible drinking. Another thing is that these stores are already strategically placed in the state, so everyone has access, but some communities aren't oversaturated with access. And another thing is the staff at these stores are unionized. They make a good living, have access to a pension, and there's good workplace training in place. Another danger that comes with legalization is that the marijuana industry could easily be taken over by big business. So there are steps the state can take to support small business participation, keeping licensing and application fees reasonable, establishing a license structure that allows for a variety of business structures and entry points for startups, create micro licensing programs and a home cultivation provision. Workforce funding can be used to help train individuals who've been harmed by the drug war for jobs in the legal industry. And states should encourage and prioritize minority-owned businesses through legalization. And just one last note I want to mention is Jake Wheatley in February 2020 introduced HB 2050, which is legislation that would legalize growing, selling, and consumption of adult use, and it would clear records of those who have faced drug charges for cannabis, what he calls cannabis clean slate. And this bill has been referred to the Health Committee at the beginning of March, so that's kind of where it is. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kadita.